So, welcome to Bodhicitta Dakini Monastery, and today's talk is about boundaries and expectations, and it's about healthy boundaries, and also what a spiritual boundary is, and what is coercive control and what is healthy relationships, and what are the vows in Buddhism that are healthy, and how do you deal with boundaries? How do you set boundaries? All of those things. I am someone who doesn't have great boundaries. I tend to be more on the big-hearted, let me bend myself in half to help you kind of person. But what I've realized is, obviously in my family, the kind of love we had was codependent love, which is, where someone feels obliged to feel other people's feelings for them and meet their needs because they're not prepared to meet their own needs and they don't know how. And that kind of guilt and obligation to each other. And that can, and it's interesting too, because according to different cultures, what is normal in one culture, in India, people don't have they're all very wrapped up in each other and connected to each other. And that's the culture. So according to Western culture, that might be codependent. But according to what might be normal for us in a society where women have their own money, whereas in a hunter-gatherer society, people can't live without each other. So that may not be codependent in the context of that society. You know what I mean? I mean, we all need each other. We all benefit from healthy social relationships. We're social creatures. But it's just about doing a bit of education to inform yourself about what is a healthy relationship where you're both benefiting and you're both getting your needs met, and you both have realistic expectations about what a relationship can give you, whether it's familial, platonic, or romantic. And when a relationship becomes abusive or draining, or more than you can manage, like you've taken on more than you can manage. And probably all of us have had at least one friend where we're like, that was more, maybe they have a lot of problems, they have a lot of trauma, they have a mental health issue, and it's like way more than we bargained for. But friends like that can also be a lot of fun, and can also be, they make you learn things, and they push you and make you exploit and reflect to yourself in ways you didn't when you just had friends that were people that were emotionally regulated and had good boundaries. So it's also about building trust, and when you can lean on someone, and how much to share should be a gradual process, not like, here I am, take it or lump it, because I don't give a shit about how you feel. I'm just here being my authentic self, and if you don't like it, So it's like finding that fine balance between being authentic and having a healthy relationship, but not having, not giving others more than they can handle, So there was an interesting thing that happened in the news that I saw. A famous surfer and model, Sarah Brady, came out and said that her quite famous, I believe he's an actor, boyfriend, called Jonah Hill, who's like a millionaire. He asked, this is like, they're both, in their early 30s. She's maybe in her 20s. He asked her not to take photos in swimwear. She's a model and a surfer. Not to take photos in swimwear, not to model, not to surf with men, and not to spend time with unstable women. And he framed this all, yes, this is still going on. He framed this all in therapy talk, which is even more confusing. Like, these are my boundaries for a healthy relationship, and if you can't accept my boundaries, I'm afraid I don't think I can love you, and we can have a child, and I can share my life with you. So it's like using something that should be wholesome to gaslight someone and make them feel like they're being crazy for just living their life, But actually, that wasn't a healthy boundary. A boundary is a line you set to preserve your energy, well-being, that is set with integrity. It's not about controlling someone else. It's not about coercive control. And it's not about making someone else responsible for your anxiety. So obviously, that man wasn't well adjusted in himself. He was anxious about his much more attractive girlfriend, you know, living her life and maybe cheating on him because he's got his own anxieties about his own, you know, looks or whatever. So he tried to control her using therapy talk. But haven't men been doing this to women for thousands of years, right? Making their desire, their insecurities, their needs for emotional attention and whatever else our problem, yeah, and controlling us through that. And sometimes women do that to men too, you know, the manipulation, and we do it to children, we do it to family members. It's not good. It's sticky and yucky, and there's got to be a better way to get our needs met. So yeah, so we need to set healthy and realistic boundaries to make the relationship healthy. Yeah. So whereas coercive control is telling someone how to dress, what to eat, when to sleep, keeping them, like, tearing down their emotional well-being and self-belief and faith in themselves, making them think they're crazy for having an emotional response or needs, separating them from family members and friends, verbally abusing them, keeping them awake, affecting their capacity to work and their well-being, basically. And this is a form of abuse. So, you know, saying you're failing to respect my boundaries, in effect, stops the conversation, you know, making it seem like it's a reasonable request. You know, like, how dare you do your job as a surfer because I don't feel comfortable with that. You know, how dare you as a model wear swimwear, you know? And it's a misappropriation of boundaries. So, you know, a healthy example of a boundary might be, you know, you can message me at work, but I won't respond until the end of the day because I have to do my job and I can't constantly be, you know, getting sidelined. Or you can be vegetarian, but I'm not always going to cook vegetarian food because I'm not vegetarian, you know? Yeah, so it's got to be a reasonable compromise between two individuals that are both capable of emotionally regulating and stating their needs. So before you accept another person's conditions, ask yourself if you're comfortable with that and if it feels reasonable. And if you don't feel like it's reasonable, ask a friend, does this sound reasonable to you? You know? I mean, you should read the rental ads, you know, like some of the requests people make is like, it's like, you know, come and live in our closet with no windows. And, you know, you can never bring over any friends. And by the way, my mother will be living rent-free in the house as well. You know, it's like, whoa. Yeah. And by the way, the doors don't lock and the toilet doesn't flush, but you know, you can manage. So yeah, in a healthy relationship, people have a clear conversation about what you need from a partner or your family or your friends. With, you know, you might say in a romantic setting, you might say, it would help me if you can regulate your emotions and you have emotional intelligence and, you know, manage your anxiety in a way that it doesn't control my life. And, you know, be clear about what you won't do. Like, I won't participate in you controlling me to manage your anxiety, you know, like and it's like all about knowing the fine line, because emotional validation, like, you know, just letting someone know that their feelings are okay and that they're safe to feel what they feel with you. Like, okay, that time I said, can we have this conversation later? I felt a bit emotionally abandoned by you. And then the other person says, okay, I can understand why you might feel that way. I just want you to know that wasn't my intention. That's emotionally validating someone rather than dismissing their emotions. But it's not necessarily saying your emotions, your feelings are my problem. Because the codependent, the pleaser, will be like, let me feel what you're feeling and sort out your problem and abandon myself. Because that's the unhealthy model of love they've been given. The model of love, which is the self-sacrificing. It's very common with women, the self-sacrificing person who abandons themselves because they're so desperate to get love and approval from others, you know? And then how the resentment builds up over the years and leads to divorce. And the person who has been with the codependent years later is going, but why? Why did they suddenly divorce me? And the codependent has, been building up this resentment over the years because they couldn't state their needs, because they were told that was selfish, right? It's not selfish to state your needs and have emotional needs as long as they're reasonable, because someone else can't be responsible for your happiness or your well-being. We all have to manage our minds, our emotions, probably our finances in this day and age, but we have to find that middle ground. It's important to be clear about what you need and what you want, especially, obviously you're not just going to be like on the first time you have coffee with a friend, by the way, I'm auditioning people as a best friend and you must be available at all hours to take my call. Here's the contract sign here. It's obviously it's a thing you share and you build trust over time, and it's no easy thing to find someone you can trust and share and rely on. It's no easy thing, believe me. So, but what does, an unhealthy relationship or coercive control, what are more of the qualities that is like manipulating a person's anxieties or beliefs, like using what you know about them to manipulate them or make them fearful that you're going to abandon them, insulting someone, putting them down, making someone doubt their own sanity and their emotional reactions, threatening to expose secrets or personal photos. For example, also like if you're with friends and like me, I'm a social figure, a public figure. So I always ask people, can I put your photo on social media? Because I have 4,000 followers, right? So it's not just me and the girls for coffee. It's me, here's my life, 4,000 people. Yeah. So instead, we compromise, we listen deeply to each other, we don't interrupt when the other person is sharing, and we seek mutually satisfying resolutions to conflict. So especially in spiritual circles, it can happen that, saying no or setting a boundary is, especially with someone who has more power than you, like a Buddhist teacher or a therapist or a parent, it can feel like uncompassionate, or if they're old or disabled or something, they're poor, they really need care and you have the ability to give it, but maybe just not the energy. It can be seen as a lack of faith or a betrayal in the family or in the spiritual community, So sometimes it's harder to say no, but you just have to be aware of sometimes people will try to shame you for having needs, having limited energy, having limited resources. It's like often, like it happens a lot with young women where like a guy's it's like the third date and he's like, are we going to hook up or not? Because it's like you owe him something because he paid for dinner, that kind of expectation. Or like, yeah, just the expectation that women behave a certain way. What do you mean you're not doing the dishes? What do you mean you're not cooking dinner? You're my mother. And it's like, honey, you're 40 and I'm 60. It's time for you to do the dishes and cook me dinner. And just because I have a particular kind of genitalia doesn't mean I owe you anything, I always remember the women at, was it the women at Woodstock? They were like, and there was like a group of feminists standing next to a group of like women from the Country Women's Association, because Woodstock turned into a kind of natural disaster. Like it was raining for 3 days. There were all these young kids with like not much planning, and it was like a big mud pit. And they, you know, a lot of them were probably on acid, and like people were getting electrocuted on stage because of the rain. It was a disaster, right? I mean, it was fun, but it was a disaster. So the Country Women's Association, you know, all these women from the wartime had, you know, just gone out there and made sandwiches. And then there were these other younger feminists just going, make your own effing sandwiches. I just love that line. So there were the country women giving out sandwiches, and then there were the feminists, make your own effing sandwich. Yeah, so and people can be shamed. People can be shamed for having boundaries and being assertive, especially women, like the term feminazi, you know. Ball buster, like a female boss. A female boss is a woman who displays assertive, so-called traditionally masculine characteristics will be demonized, whereas a man who does that will be like, high five, brother, you're a leader, you're an alpha male. Whereas a woman is like, she's a female dog, whatever, you know, ball buster. Because of traditional ideas about what women owe men or what men owe women as well. It's like, what do you mean you're staying home and minding the kids? Aren't you a man? You know, like all these ridiculous kind of, but they still exist, these kind of, and they're being revived, these kind of tropes that limit people, you know, as well. Like, and, you know, when a woman is successful and she's happy alone, you know, that's terrifying to men. Like, what do you mean you're alone and you don't need a man and you're confident in your job? You're fat. Because that's like the last thing they can say to make you feel bad about yourself. Because it's like, you know, what do you mean you're happy and you're well adjusted and you don't need anyone, and okay, you're fat, so you must hate yourself and, you know, not be happy. How can I destroy your peace of mind? Yeah, so just for having boundaries and being assertive, you can also be hated for that because of what society and the opposite sex feel that you owe them. Yeah, so boundaries help us take care of ourselves and get our needs met and help us avoid resentment. And, you know, what does a lack of good boundaries look like? Oversharing, seeking to please because of fear of rejection. Like sometimes we find ourselves, you know, defrosting someone's fridge. It happens sometimes with women who they always end up the guy's friend instead of their girlfriend because maybe they don't feel good enough to just ask him, do you like me? So they're, you know, taking his mother to the hospital and, I don't know, minding his kids. And you're like, how did I get here? Just because I can't ask, hey, do you like me? I become the default friend, you know, or not feeling that we're worthy enough, you know, the things we do because we feel we're not worthy enough, or society feels we're not worthy enough of love. So boundaries are also a communication about the kind of behavior that we're ready to accept from others because we accept the love we think we deserve. Yeah, so, yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, and it's about understanding your personal needs and how to communicate them, valuing your own opinions, and accepting when others say no, because if you set boundaries, others will also set boundaries. And boundaries can be different in different cultures, as I mentioned. And there are different kinds of boundaries, you know, physical, like displays of affection. For example, a Muslim woman or man might have a completely different set of, I know the way affection is expressed in India. In India, you'll never see a woman and a man kissing together in public. You'll see men holding hands. They're not gay, they're just friends. You won't see men and women holding hands. It's very conservative, you know. So you have to understand the culture, the beliefs of the person you're with, and how you hold hands, you know? I mean, how you express your affection. And then sexual boundaries, obviously that's pretty clear. Intellectual, what thoughts and beliefs that someone has. Like if someone is not respecting your beliefs and dismisses your thoughts and ideas, there are maybe some ideas that should be dismissed, like homophobia or, I don't know, just really way out theory that has no scientific basis. Not all opinions are equal, and it's not a bad thing to have someone push back and question your beliefs or your bigotry or whatever. But it's another thing to, like, I know there's this thing that happens with atheists and people who believe in something, and some people take it upon themselves to just rip apart someone's faith. And it's like, what benefit is that? You're just making them feel attacked, and you're taking away something that gives them comfort, and they're just gonna hold on to whatever it is they believe even more strongly. Like, they give advice to people who join cults or really weigh out conspiracy theories. They say, don't argue those ideas, accept them and just support them, and maybe feed them a little bit of rationalism or ask them a question now and then, but don't attack them, because they're just going to withdraw more intensely into something that has given them comfort and safety. So yeah. And it's, having good boundaries, it's also about understanding what is your stuff and what is someone else's stuff. Like, I had a friend who I just spoke about, I'm an activist, so I speak about stuff online that is sometimes confronting, sexual abuse in religion or feminism or social injustice. And I'm probably more intense online than I am in person. And one day I was just being honest. I just said, the monastery doesn't have a lot of support and it's really hard and I don't know how longer I can stay here. And then one of my friends got really offended in Deloraine, and she took it really personally, even though she never visits the monastery. She's like, what right do you have to demand support? And I work, and like, she was just taking it super personal. And it was like, this isn't anything to do with you. You're not a Buddhist. This is something directed at people who are already Buddhist. I don't expect non-Buddhists to just support me or give me money or anything, because I haven't served them and I haven't done anything for them. But she took it, she couldn't distinguish what was her stuff about feeling, I don't know, whatever issues that she found my post triggering. But it's, it's a good thing when you know what is your stuff and what is someone else's stuff, and you can take care of your own mind. And sometimes you just literally need to say, I need to step away now because I'm feeling triggered, I'm feeling under attack, or, this isn't good for me. It's giving me a lot of anxiety. It's bringing up a lot of my old issues. And maybe it's not about the other person, but it's about you getting triggered, and saying to someone, you can't say that because it makes me uncomfortable. Depends. It depends. It's context, yeah. So, lack of boundaries can lead to emotional and physical fatigue. So it's good to set boundaries early and to be consistent. And you don't need to pile on a whole bunch in the beginning. You just start with a few. If you're someone who has trouble setting boundaries, just start with a few. Like, I deserve to be respected. I deserve to feel heard. I deserve kindness. I deserve to have my feelings validated, as long as my expectations are realistic. Because your feelings are still your responsibility. And practice self-love and engage in activities you enjoy. Don't just wait for someone else to come along. This whole, Prince on the White Horse, it's such a unhealthy myth we give our daughters, like a girl is sleeping waiting for her life to start when a man kisses her. Like, it's so unhealthy. We need to be healthy and complete in ourselves before someone else comes along and completes us. We need to be our own best friend before we can be a friend of someone else. So practice self-love, and make yourself happy. Fill yourself up. And recognize also others' boundaries and needs, and whether they're compatible. So in terms of Buddhism, and every spiritual path has certain ethical guidelines. And the nice thing about Buddhism is we don't say thou shalt not, and if you don't, you're going to hell. We just say, I undertake the training. And that means, to the best of my ability, I'm trying to be a good person. So, for example, Buddhism has something called the 5 precepts, which are don't take life, don't steal, and don't take what is not freely given. And that could include like environmental, don't take more than you need. Recognize that someone may be giving away a lot, but they probably may not have that much to give, so only take what you need and give something back. Don't use harsh words or wrong speech like gossip and lying and manipulation and harsh divisive speech. Try to bring people together with kind words, kind speech, wisdom, and not just gossip. Something uplifting, something wholesome. Because, with our words, we can cause discord or we can uplift people. Think of I have a dream speech, like my MLK, that's the power of words. Words can create divorce, create suffering, or they can create, something beautiful. In terms of like speaking out against injustice, I view that as right speech, because bad things happen when good people do nothing. So speaking the truth, as long as it's useful, it's not really useful to say kind of, you look terrible in that dress or something. It's not useful, not kind. And then, no sexual misconduct. So that means if you're in a monogamous relationship, a commitment to stay faithful to your partner. And also if you're single, to only have sex with a consenting adult, protecting children from sexual abuse, understanding that teachers, clergy, should not be sleeping with their students, because it's like a psychologist sleeping with their client. And if the teacher does fall in love with a student, they should publicly announce it, and that student should cease being their spiritual student. And they should do this over a few months, not like immediately, because it's very problematic when these people suddenly realize, like, I opened myself up to this spiritual teacher and they used what they knew to manipulate me, and they've been doing it to 5 other people. Right? So so a clergy or a teacher has more power in the dynamic, and therefore a responsibility to set good boundaries about that relationship. And it's not always easy, because sometimes they're your friend as well as your student. And where does the line, where's the line? And then no alcohol and intoxicants. So a lot of Buddhists don't take this vow because they like their glass of wine at the end of the week. And some people realize that they're drinking more than they need to, and it's affecting their health and their relationships, and they're using it to numb themselves rather than deal with their emotional issues. Or they're really unhappy in their lives and they're using alcohol as a crutch, and they need better work-life balance or whatever, So these are the 5 precepts. And then like on a full moon, Buddhists would take the 8 precepts, which are like living like a monk for the day, like eating moderately, only eating breakfast and lunch, no dinner. And obviously this is not something you do if you're diabetic or you have special food needs or whatever. And not watching entertainments, and just like meditating and reading some spiritual books on that day, like simplifying your life, basically. And then also like we try to remove unwholesome thoughts from our mind, which is not always easy. But just sometimes you have a thought and you go, that's a bit of a stupid thought, I'm not going to follow it. Or I'm not going to speak it. Not every thought that comes in our head should be spoken or followed, and even the thoughts we have about ourselves, like I'm not good enough, I'm ugly, I'm unlovable, whatever, you can just go, not so useful, and is it really true? Or is it just something someone told me once that I took hold of, that I've been carrying someone else's issues on my back, someone else's You know, sometimes someone will say something devastating to us because they want to manipulate us and they want us to settle. You know, when we know we deserve better. Yeah, and then there's the bodhisattva vows, which are, so bodhicitta is great compassion. There are 3 forms of Buddhism: Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana. Theravada is found in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia. It's probably closest to what the Buddha originally taught. The monks are very strict. Like, for example, if I was a monk and a lady came over, I'd have to say, bring a friend, because I can't see you alone. Whereas Mahayana, the monks and nuns, the goal is to benefit as many people as possible and become enlightened together. And the emphasis is on compassion and therefore flexibility. So if a bloke comes over, I just say hi, you know, and I'm flexible. But obviously there are some lines, like I'm not going to say, hey, give me a massage. You know what I mean? I'm not, and I'm not going skinny dipping with you or something. And no, you can't garden naked here. So yeah, there's a line, you know, and no, you can't get stoned here or something. So it's just about boundaries. And then Vajrayana is it's like Mahayana. So Zen Buddhism is part of Mahayana, and it was found in North Asia. And the emphasis is on the goal of the bodhisattva, the spiritual warrior who becomes awakened to benefit all beings and bring them to enlightenment, and practices the path of the perfections, which are generosity, moral conduct, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom, which is a whole different teaching on itself. But Vajrayana is just esoteric Mahayana with like these archetypes that are not gods. They're just an archetype of what we ourselves can become. And it uses more ritual and more colors, sounds, mantras. It's just a bit of a more symbolic, more ritual-oriented form of Mahayana, but the intention is the same. So there's these things called the bodhisattva vows, which are about living with compassion and doing no harm, and committing to transform your mind to a regular practice and to serving all beings. And these vows, these bodhisattva vows, are probably only relevant to someone who has already, you know, become a Buddhist and has been practicing a few months or years. But it's just interesting to look at what they are. So these bodhisattva vows are things like, you know, don't destroy towns, don't cause people to give up their spiritual practice, their faith in the Mahayana, their commitment to compassion. Don't cause people, if they're a monk or a nun, to disrobe. And don't cause them to give back their bodhisattva vows. Don't belittle the practice of other traditions of Buddhism. Don't falsely proclaim a realization that you don't have. So be very humble about your spiritual practice. In Buddhism, we don't try to convert people because the spiritual path is a very personal thing. You know, so you can enjoy meditation without being Buddhist. And don't accept like donations that were given to a temple or to the Buddha, his teachings and his community for yourself if they weren't meant for you. It's more for someone who's like a monk or a nun or a Buddhist teacher or a mindfulness teacher. You know, sometimes people make a heap of money out of mindfulness and they don't say, actually, this came from Buddhism. You know, they're kind of asset stripping Buddhism. You know, like, what's here that I can make money from? Okay, let's just take out the altruism in the community and let's charge them a heap of money for it. Yeah, or like, I mean, just think of all these self-proclaimed gurus, if they gave up praising themselves and belittling others, you know, and not forgiving others if they apologize. If you're on the bodhisattva path and someone asks you about Dharma, even if you're in the middle of getting your groceries, you're supposed to teach them. So if you ever see me sitting on in the aisle at Woolies with someone, Obviously, they asked me a really good question. Yeah, and not supporting injustice or murder or corruption, or giving up compassion, basically, because everybody has Buddha nature. Everybody has the potential to become an awakened being. The Buddha was just a person who found the purity of his own mind and then taught it to others. So that is, it's no easy thing to, to not be sectarian, to not, to avoid holding wrong views, to not teach Buddhism in a way that beginners can't understand. All of these things, it's no easy thing to keep these vows. They're a bit more complex and contextual than that, but that's like a brief overview. But to me, after 25 years as a Buddhist, the most beautiful thing I've learned is compassion and this understanding that others are my second self, that I only exist in relation to non-self elements. And therefore, if I don't care for the water, if I don't care for the earth, if I don't care for community, I suffer. And they're part of me. So that's another interesting point of view in terms of setting boundaries, because everything comes from others. So service and compassion are really necessary. And how do we do that without being codependent and without having our own agenda? Because as long as we're not enlightened, we probably will have our own agenda. Like, how dare you not, I'm here giving you the homeless person soup. How dare you not thank me and make me feel good? And this expectation, if you help someone who's messed up, chances are they're probably not going to do what you'd hope they'd do because they have a whole bunch of trauma. And it's like the parable of the sower. I threw some seeds on barren ground and nothing grew, and I threw some seeds on fertile soil and something grew. But you have to help without expectation, because everybody's at a different stage and has different life experiences. It's really interesting being an advocate for human rights and like trying to raise money for a charity in financially hard times, and trying to make people care about people that they've never met, and also like talking about spiritual abuse. Like, most people don't want to know that the spiritual tradition they've got faith in has abusers there, and people will, or you'll say, hey, there's a whole bunch of gender inequality here, and this has been my experience. I've struggled because of this. Most people won't want to, they'll just, that's there, because it disturbs them, and it's hard to acknowledge that about something you love. It's like being told, hey, your husband beat his last girlfriend. You just don't want to know that someone you love or something you love has got that element there. So I've done that, and when I say those things, I get a lot of pushback, and they're like, you want to destroy Buddhism and you hate men. And actually, it takes years for some people to come back to me and go, oh, actually what you said was right. So yeah, you have to just stand for the truth, even if it makes you unpopular, and advocate for those who don't have a voice, even though other people will be like, but I'm suffering too. So yeah, it may make you unliked sometimes to stand up for injustice. I mean, people can now be charged $30,000 for just saying fossil fuels are killing the planet. Like, just chaining yourself to something or protesting can get you thrown in jail. It's crazy, isn't it? But that's sometimes what it takes, Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
Squillions, but I can't get them in order yet. My mind is just overfull of monkey brain.
Yeah.
I love what you are teaching. I respect your thoughts and feelings on it, and I agree with so much of what you teach. I just can't ever put it in words for myself, but you did it for me. And my mind is taking it in. It's just, I'm sorry, just overloaded at the moment. I need time.
Sure.
It really has affected me very, very deeply.
In a good way,
In
hopefully.
so many ways. Oh,